I'm going to control my state to always be in this high vibrational high state all the time. That's based upon fear and avoidance. And all you're doing is creating resistance. It's not actually built upon power. True power is being able to fully be with and derive the depth from every single experience unshakably. That's what makes you unshakable. The spiritual community, I think for a lot of people, they've become disillusioned. They've become disillusioned to this idea that we can somehow transcend the human experience, that we can somehow raise, if we only just were to raise our vibration enough, then we would stop having dense emotions and we would stop experiencing difficulty and suffering in our life. And this is where spirituality, in my mind, really starts to become a weapon against our humanity. And you know, I see this a lot, especially in the spiritual community on YouTube, and it's just like, to be honest, it really pisses me off. Like, it's just such bullshit. There's so many videos you could type in so many videos of like how to raise your vibration, how to have a spiritual awakening. All of this shit, guys, all of it is based upon this unconscious shaming of the human experience, of our emotions, of our sensitivities and our vulnerabilities. And we have just people on here throwing around these teachings saying, oh, if you do this, you'll manifest whatever you want. If you stay around long enough, you start to see how the deepest aspects of spirituality, it's not about getting what you want. It's not about manifesting something. It's about feeling more peace, feeling more at home in yourself and in the world. Because we have the experience of having an ego, of being separate selves, of living in the material world, which is what this reality is, right? There are wounds that accompany that. There are abandonment wounds, there are emotional issues, there are loneliness, there's apathy, and along with that, we're also moving through a phase where we're being called as a species to heal the collective human shadow, to actually heal and integrate all the intergenerational trauma that our species carries, and simplifying this into, oh, if you could just raise your vibration, or if you could just act as if, then you would transcend those experiences. It's bullshit. It's not true. You don't evolve or expand your consciousness only through touching higher vibrational states. I'm not saying that those practices aren't beneficial or useful, but the real ascent is also a descent. We descend into the body, we descend into the unconscious, we descend into our emotions where our trauma is stored, so that we could integrate those aspects of ourselves. And the result is a more stable frequency. The result is a deeper experience of light. You know, when we try and use something like, for example, David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, the different frequencies of consciousness, which is, you'll see that littered everywhere in the spiritual community on YouTube, but it doesn't help you heal your wounds, because wounds, emotional wounds, are relational phenomenon. And raising your vibration does not solve relational emotional trauma. It just doesn't. And so there's this huge distortion in the spiritual community where people are trying to transcend their humanity. They're trying to transcend their wounding through raising their vibration. And this doesn't work because it's based upon the premise of shame. What you're unconsciously saying is that this part of me is bad and wrong, and therefore I need to fix it. And automatically, what that does is you're trying to cut that part of yourself off. You're trying to cut off your wounds. You're trying to cut out your shadow. You're trying to cut out your triggers. You're trying to cut out these low vibrations. And all that's doing is exasperating them. It's just pushing it down. It's repressing them. And it might work for a short amount of time, but it's not sustainable, because that energy is going to come out sideways. It's going to come out in another form. And this is where we need to supplement and use tools that are actually designed for emotional integration and healing, which spiritual practice is not. Approaching healing from this orientation is actually an act of violence against yourself, and it's only going to serve to further fragment you. This is why you see people spending years in meditation, spending years doing plant medicine ceremonies, spending years reading books, going to workshops, and they're still dealing with all of the low self-worth, the depression, the anxiety, the toxic and abusive relationships with others and with themselves, and all of these things. It's because they're treating their wounds as problems to be fixed with the tool of spiritual practice, which does not work. Imagine having a child coming to you crying and saying, you just need to meditate more, and then wondering why things don't get better or why things just get worse. You know, I've seen this. I've been to, Dr. Joe Dispenza events and things like this, and these are great events for specific purposes, right? But for example, at those events, almost every single person, there was this fear of negative emotions. There was this fear of low vibrations. There was this inauthenticity. There was this inauthenticity where everyone's going to try and be happy and on all the time. That's not how nature works. Nature is cyclical and rhythmic, and there is growth and aliveness as much as there is death and decay. And we have this culture that just values the ascent, just values the solar. But we've forgotten the lunar, we've forgotten the soil, the dirt, the muck, which is the nourishment for new life to grow. You can't have rebirth without death, and vice versa, right? We need the full spectrum. I'm not glorifying suffering, but we need the full spectrum. And the shift happens, the shift in healing occurs. How healing actually starts to happen is when we start to understand that our wounds are not obstacles to be overcome. They're not obstacles on the path. They are the path. They are the path to higher consciousness. The deeper you can descend into your body and actually feel what's there and create safety and repattern your nervous system and change the dysfunctional relational dynamics that have been conditioned into you from your family of origin, which is just a fact of human existence, that's when spirituality can actually come down into a clear vessel and can come down and filter down into your emotional body, into your relationships, on a consistent and sustainable scale. Because if you're trying to avoid the breakdown, if you're trying to avoid the collapse, if you're trying to avoid your emotions, and people do this unconsciously, even if you know what I'm saying and oh, spiritual bypassing is a thing, this happens very, very, very subtly. It's an art, it's mastery. What I'm talking about here is mastery. And in its essence, spirituality is meant to enhance and ennoble our humanity, not eradicate it. That's not the spirituality of our times. Transcending into no self and non-duality and not having a personality or an ego. That's not the trajectory of evolution that's attempting to happen through humanity. Spirituality is changing. The revelations are changing. How the divine wants to move through us is changing. There wants to be an inclusion of the ego, an inclusion of our sensitivities, an inclusion of the body. And this is a reclamation of the feminine principle of divinity, which is form, which is God and immanence. In esoteric Christianity, they call it Sophia, the soul of the world. It is nature. It is our body. It is our emotions. It is our intuitive self. It is relationship, community. Instead of the masculine ascent of spirituality, which is asceticism and transcendence. Sit and meditate for 20 hours a day in a cave. That is not going to serve us anymore. And we have to get out of this idea that we need to somehow transcend the full spectrum of human experience. We're meant to sanctify and spiritualize the full spectrum of the human experience by going deeper into it, not by avoiding it. That's how we actually bring these parts with us into our evolution instead of cutting them off. The other way, this way that's like being perpetuated in the spiritual community, it's a form of control. It's a form of fear. I'm going to control my state to always be in this high vibrational high state all the time. That's based upon fear and avoidance. And all you're doing is creating resistance. It's not actually built upon power. True power is being able to fully be with and derive the depth from every single experience unshakably. That's what makes you unshakable. When you can hold yourself in your grief and your tears and your anger and your valid rage, which is necessary. All of these things are necessary. They're not things to, they're not bad or wrong. If they hijack you and completely overrun you, that's when it becomes unsupportive, we could say. But the way it does that, the way we master the way we master these realms is by becoming familiar with them, allowing the emotion to express through your body. And so the way to have a spiritual awakening in 2023 is to include the body. It's to include your emotions. It's to include your relationships. It's to bridge your isolated internal spiritual practices with the external world, with the rest of your life, to infuse these frequencies into every aspect of our being, into the full range of our experience. We're being asked to evolve here. That's what's happening. So I have tons of resources for you guys. If you're looking to learn more about how to actually process your emotions and how to actually connect to your body in a deeper way, how to do embodiment work, and how to bridge that with spirituality, bridging both the human and the divine. I have some videos here on my YouTube channel, which in 2023, it's my intention to create more videos on this channel. But I would recommend to you to follow me on Instagram. I have tons of stuff on there. That's where my entire coaching practice is mainly based upon. Tons of free content, tons of information. And if you watch this far, thank you so much. I deeply appreciate you. And I'm excited to step into this new spirituality with you in 2023.